Good evening, everyone. Hello there, and welcome to the Union League Club of Chicago. My name is Janine McGreal, and I am the current CFO of this beautiful and magical place. I am also a past president of the chapter, FEI Chicago chapter, and I've been involved with the chapter for about 15 years in many different capacities, and it's good to see old friends and new faces. So I took over for this CFO of this club about 9 months ago, and she was here for 23 years. So needless to say, I'm a little busy, as you probably can imagine. I just want to introduce, or just say a few words about how I was first introduced to this club through FEI, to be exact. So many, many years ago, when I first started with the chapter, we would come to events just like this. And I always got to see like one floor of this 23-floor building. And I was like, wow, this is so pretty. So through many of my associations and friends of FEI, I'm sure some of you know Steve Brown. Steve is a very big friend of the chapter. And I was talking to him one morning, and I said, you know, Steve, I'm in the market again. And he said, oh my God, the Union League Club's looking for a CFO. And I was like, my eyes went wide, and I said, that's my job. So it's through the beauty of networking and organizations like FEI and making those strong connections that beautiful things can happen. Thank you. Just a little bit about the club, because I want to do a little commercial. Things I love about this place. There's 23 floors, 5 floors of athletics, 180 guest rooms, which you would never guess, and many floors for weddings and conferences and the like. It's a very patriotic place, in case you can't tell. Community, culture, and connections is our motto. Every meeting that we have internally, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and it makes me want to cry. There's beautiful art, not only here, but on every single floor in this building. And there's a lot of old art. There's an actual Monet on the second floor, which is fabulous, the most iconic piece in the place. And accordingly, it's the second largest art collection, second only to the Art Institute of Chicago in the Midwest. The other things I love is every single day I come and experience the warm sense of home from the staff, the visitors, and the members. I encourage all of you, to schedule a tour. We've left some little QR codes on the tables in the next room. You can just take a picture of that, and in the back, you'll get to see my friend Christine Sparks. She's a colleague of mine and a good friend. She's our membership director, and I'd love for you to reach out and just take a tour one day. And we're running a promo now where you could be a member for a day, just because. So. A few I would like to welcome everyone to the Hidden Treasures, Unlocking the Value Through Targeted Cost Management. These fine people are going to explain all that, and I could probably take a few tips for the club, too. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you would like CPE credits, make sure to stop by the registration desk to sign in and certify your attendance. The session will be recorded and distributed in a follow-up email along with the slide deck, speaker info, and other resources. There will be time allotted after the presentation for more questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel moderator, Frank Cesario, CEO of Yunhong?
That works.
Yunhong? CTI Limited. Frank worked as a CFO for 20 years at 5 entities, primarily small publicly traded manufacturers. He has served as FEI Chicago chapter president, as well as a director on the FEI National Board, and is a good friend. Frank and panel, the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. So one other thing I've learned as 20-year CFO, make sure you have your raffle ticket because we have good giveaways after this. So on top of Q&A at the end and a great in between now and then, make sure you have one of these or see Landon. Right? All right, let's get this show on the road. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their entity. And we're going to start with Richard Bruyere, Director at Intratem.
Thank you very much. I'm Richard Bruyere. I'm the Director of Business Development for a company called Intratem. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, California, but I live here in Illinois. A little bit about me. My background is pretty unique in this space. I was a Director of Telecom for a healthcare network. I managed 3 hospitals and 30 clinics for about 8 years. Went from there to a company in Seattle, Washington. I was Vice President of Operations for 8 years and Chief Operating Officer for 2 years. Ended up going to work for a company in New York where I was supposed to be doing business development and product management and somehow got tricked into doing sales. So I ended up in charge of sales for 13 years and then found myself now with Intratem. And Intratem is a company that provides mobility lifecycle management services. So usually any organization more than 100 cellular devices up to the largest client I think we have has close to 50,000 devices right now today. And we typically are able to reduce the organization's spend by anywhere from 25 to 40% without changing contracts or carriers. We're a partner of Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, and we provide full mobility lifecycle management services. So help desk, procurement, staging and kitting, expense management, reporting, and inventory management.
Thank you. Welcome. Our second panelist is Bryan Price, Managing Director of the Seismic Group.
Thank you. Bryan Price, Partner and Managing Director at the Seismic Group. I've been with the firm 23 years. We are a supply chain consulting firm, and I've spent my entire career in manufacturing and supply chain, various manufacturers, that most of which you guys would be familiar with names. The Seismic Group has a number of different practices that impact across the spectrum of the supply chain. The legacy piece of our business, and what I'll probably spend most of my time on today with comments and focus, is on strategic procurement, both direct and indirect spend areas. We also have a facility solutions group. We work with manufacturers and distribution companies that need to develop and build new facilities, brownfield or greenfield, consolidate facilities, et cetera. Then we also work across operations and logistics, and then we also have a very unique packaging optimization practice. So we'll talk more a little bit later.
Very good, thank you. Our third panelist is Erin Duffy, Director at Imagine 360.
Thanks, Frank. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Duffy. I am with an organization called Imagine 360. I've been in the healthcare, health insurance space for 15 years. I started on the broker consultant side, made a stop at a startup, and then have been now with Imagine 360 for close to 5 years. We help organizations take back control of healthcare. We are a health plan. So when organizations put our solution in place, we typically see companies save between 15 and 30% on your medical claim savings alone without eroding benefits and changing. So really excited to be with you all this evening.
Thank you and welcome. And our final panelist is Corey Siegrist, Tenant Representative at JLL.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I am with JLL. I'm a managing director within the tenant representation group. I've been with the company now for about 14 years. We're headquartered here in Chicago, full service global real estate. In addition to the tenant representation, we also do facility management, lease administration, consulting, business and economic incentives, facility management. So I'm a small spoke within a huge wheel of services. So tonight I'm going to speak mainly about how we can save on the occupancy planning side and the lease side.
Well, thank you. Just to set up our conversation, FEI Chicago put out a survey on LinkedIn. in anticipation of this panel. And what we asked is, where have you found the area of the most cost savings for your enterprise? Interestingly, the number one answer was technology, and a very close second was raw materials and supply chain. And so I'm going to ask you that same question in about an hour, so get ready for it. But starting off with Bryan, who's going to lead us off. Bryan, we saw record price increases on everything. And so how would you advise procurement groups to take advantage of what increases are available to get rolled back into your organization?
So I think I'll start with a good news, bad news kind of answer. The good news is, for the most part, markets are coming back to the buy side over the last 6 to 18 months. So that's actually a good thing, finally. The bad news is, as any for-profit business, which our vendors and suppliers are, they're not going to willingly give that back. So it is going to take a very concerted effort to begin to claw back as much of that as possible. So what can you do? I'd maybe think of 3 things. First of all, get out there in the market. There are opportunities to, and maybe we can get into this here a little bit later of where, but there are absolute opportunities to begin to bring back some of those increases. It's not all going to come back because their costs have truly increased as well. But there was some margin creep over the last 2 to 3 years that's available. Secondly is, it has to be done with the right process. The old 3 bids in a cloud of dust isn't going to be the right approach. It's got to be a really data-driven, kind of really open market type effort. You don't just go get bids from 2 incumbents and maybe one other one and say, we're done. Third thing is, please do not be afraid to avail yourself of expertise. In most cases, the expertise in a room is usually going to be the supplier. Arm yourselves with expertise by category to even that conversation. There's a lot of expertise out there available, but make use of it.
Thank you. Corey, if we take a step back, how can an entity get a temperature check on its facility spend?
Yeah, good question. I mean, as everybody knows, there are a ton of headwinds that companies are facing right now with interest rates, inflation, banking crisis. So we're seeing a lot of the C-suite, go to procurement, go to whoever's running the facility side, and try to find ways to reduce those costs. The simplest way from a leasing perspective is to take a quick look and audit your lease. Oftentimes, you'll see that you may have some flexibility as it relates to termination options, contraction options. But I would also, what we're telling companies is to really take a step back and mark-to-market comparison. Where do you stand? Are you above, below market? Depending on what market you're in nowadays, you could have there could be some opportunity savings. But take a step back, find out how you relate to the market. Start there. We do these lease audits. We'll bring these to a CFO or to a COO and bring these opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. Go.
No, I could keep going for hours.
Okay. And we will get back to all of these. Erin, let's mix it up a little bit. Your firm's mission statement is to help companies solve runaway healthcare spending. Can you walk us through the concept of reference-based pricing?
I can. Well, I think first off, can everyone acknowledge in this room that there's a problem with healthcare? Yes. Okay, it's broken, right? There's a lot of things we can do to fix it. Doesn't happen overnight, and it's not easy. So has anyone heard of the term reference-based pricing or the solution? Couple no's, couple yeses. Okay, so we are in business to really disrupt healthcare because Blue Cross, Cigna, United, Aetna, their stock prices are going up, and that's great. But that's not great for you all in your positions, nor is it great for the 100 million Americans that have poor credit reporting due to healthcare. It's just expensive, right? And so what reference-based pricing seeks to do is remove those players from the table. The company themselves becomes the insurance company as a self-funded employer. And then what we do is pay providers what we feel is a fair and reasonable reimbursement above Medicare, which they're already accepting, or that hospital self-reported cost. So in a reference-based pricing model, you're no longer beholden to this in and out of network dance and game that's played. It's really more of an open access, no network play, where our whole mission is pay fair and reasonable prices. And for the most part, keep going where you're going, but we're gonna audit the claims and make sure, okay, if you're charging Frank for 10 screws, because 10 screws come in a package, but we see that they only use 2, the plan's only going to pay for 2, and then Frank's going to pay his portion of the 2, right? So we really, reference-based pricing is about sitting with an employer as co-fiduciary and watching your pocket or purse or wallet as if it's our own. So we kind of turn healthcare on its head a little bit.
So the word that I'm thinking of is transparency. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. That is a fair statement.
Thank you. Richard, can you explain the concept of mobility lifecycle management and how that fits in today's risk environment?
I certainly can. I'll tell you, this is a question I could probably spend hours talking about, but what I'll share tonight is the top 2 that I typically hear when I meet with CFOs. The first one being economic volatility, and the second one being political instability. Probably now more than ever, the second one is certainly a concern. But you know, with economic volatility, it can affect your budgets. It can affect your ability to invest where you need to for expanding your mobility within your environment. It can also affect your ability to upgrade systems. It can delay implementations. And obviously, it can result in suboptimal or higher costs when you're trying to implement these things. With political instability, you know, it can create a lot of uncertainty. What's going to happen? What is going to happen with the regulatory environment? It's going to impact compliance requirements and for your mobility solutions. It'll potentially have changes in trade policies, which could affect our supply chain. We saw all of that when COVID hit. And I always like to ask this question because for a short time I did some work with a company that did strategy execution management. But how many, if we're being totally honest with ourselves, were prepared and had a contingency plan for what if there's a pandemic? Nobody was prepared for that, more than likely. Maybe there was somebody, but more than likely not. So one thing we learned, though, is obviously you need to be prepared for as much as you possibly can. When COVID hit for us, not because we had a crystal ball, not because we could foresee the future, we got lucky. Because of the fact that we manage a lot of very large global enterprise organizations, we managed to have on hand a very high number of mobile jetpacks. Verizon literally ran out of mobile jetpacks at the beginning of the pandemic. They didn't have them. And obviously, a majority of the workforce started to shift to work from home. We were able to help our clients just because of the fact that we had those available and we didn't mark those prices up. We passed them on to them for the same price they would have paid for them prior to the pandemic. So we do help our clients to prepare for the what-if scenarios. If this happens, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to be prepared? And we've been pretty successful at helping clients to do that. So the biggest thing I would say is, you can't prepare for everything, but you can certainly prepare for these 2 areas in particular, just by really taking a look at how you're going to handle it.
Thank you. Bryan, if we separate spending between direct and indirect courses of action, where do you see opportunities today?
Maybe starting on the indirect, and I'll keep my focus separate from these 2 areas of indirect spend, but maybe more on the repetitive material expense side. Corporately, office supplies, we're seeing a lot of opportunity, and that really potentially impacts every type of organization. The MRO, the repetitive material and facility-based expenses, we're also seeing across both of those areas 10 to 15% cost improvement opportunities, if not more. depending on the organization. If I go switch to the direct material side, most all areas of packaging, the markets have come back to the buy side. There's a couple laggards, but for the most part, we're back to seeing 10 to up to 20% cost savings opportunities on a well-run sourcing effort. On the commodity, the true commodity side, it's more spotty. I would tell you resins have really come back nicely to the buy side. There's a lot of opportunity if people may not feel like they've really stayed tight to that market. Metals as well. The ag-based commodities, because they're so crop dependent, not as much opportunity there, but it is beginning to loosen up. But packaging for sure. I would also add, and this may even go to the sustainability headline as well, packaging optimization represents a ton of opportunity to take material costs out of packaging, not just margin costs. And you can impact not only material, but automation, freight. So there's different expense buckets you can hit with a real nice effort there. So a lot of opportunities opening up.
Thank you. Corey, during our planning session, you shared a terrific example of how you helped a client save money and execute their back-to-office strategy at the same time. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so this was about 1.5 years ago now. We work with a law firm. We've been working with them for about 10 years, and their lease was coming up in April, so about a month ago, and we started working on their vision and their plan. Again, about 18 months ago. They are in a Class B asset, a very old building, not very efficient. They were on a couple of different floors, so didn't have contiguous space. They're having a challenges getting employees back in as we were still, going through COVID. So we sat down. We helped develop a program for them to really create some energy. We decided that a move was probably the right option for them. So we went ahead and we actually helped them save $2 million over on a long-term basis. We had a 10-year term, but we're able to obtain incentives such as gross rent abatement, tenant improvement allowance, and really move them from a Class C building to a Class B building. So a lot of the trends that we're seeing nowadays are companies really take advantage of the current market situation, that flight to quality that everybody's been reading about. This is a great example of that. Going from a C class to B class building, getting brand new space, and really creating the energy for employees to come back to the office. So that was not only saved them money, just got them excited about coming back to the office, because that's where the struggle has been, obviously.
And so it worked. The employees came back to the office?
Yeah, the employees are coming back. It's when you take a look at what's going out in the market right now, companies are obviously struggling. The return to office, the hybrid model. How are people going to come back? The C-suite is coming to us. In our workplace strategy team, we've had hundreds of conversations with numerous companies. Everybody's curious about what everybody else is doing. So that, the past 3 years have been mainly, consulting. People want to know, how can we attract these people back to the office? And most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's real estate. How can we create an environment that's more engaging, that people get excited about coming back to? So it's an ongoing challenge, and as you guys are reading about it, it's a slow return to office, but we're seeing attitudes change, and larger companies take a stance on return to office.
Thank you. Erin, you shared some mind-blowing data on how people pay vastly different rates for things like MRIs and all sorts of other events. Can you share some of that data and explain why we willingly pay such different schedules?
Yes. How much time do I have? So every hospital CFO is required to disclose their cost, their all-in cost, self-reported, and they're required to disclose that to Medicare because Medicare really is the largest insurer in the country. And there's about a 2 to 3% margin that Medicare is paying to those hospitals. And so we know what the hospital's actual cost is, and we know what they're being charged for Medicare. But when carriers, Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, United, we sometimes call those the BUCAs, if you've heard that term before, when they negotiate contracts with hospitals, it's a discount off of an inflated billed charge because there is no regulation in the United States of what hospitals can charge. That's why you could go down the street to Rush and pay one thing different than University of Chicago than Advocate. Not only that, the quality is going to really range, right? And so when carriers build these discounts, it's off of an inflated or billed charge. And the consumer doesn't really get to see what am I paying or what is this discount. And so employers that are on a carrier model are paying that, we'll call it 50% discount off of the billed charge. But what reference-based pricing does is says we want providers to make a fair income, but charging 200, 300, 400% above Medicare is just not appropriate, and it's egregious, and the private insurance individuals shouldn't have to have that burden. And so just to give you a flavor, I'm not going to name the hospital name, but I'll tell you some rough estimates. There's a hospital in Chicago that they reported as their self-reported cost $87 for a CT scan, okay? What they wanted to bill for that is $4,400. If you're on a carrier plan, you get a 50% discount, it's $2,200. Because of the way that this model just thinks differently about healthcare, our clients would pay $184. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I will say when I started at the organization, I went to an open enrollment meeting, and the individual that I went with, he's like, Erin, we got to stop at the Dollar Tree. And I had just started. I'm like, what are we doing? Where are we going? And so we pick up bandages and gauze and all these things, and we go back to the on-site meeting, and we pull it out in front of a room much like this, and we ask employees, what would you pay for this? What do you think? And you can imagine the answers were wildly vast. And we explained that we had just paid $1, but if you're on a different plan, you would have paid closer to $100. So this is why your employer is taking control of this expense, and the heads nodded. But yeah, usually I have a CT scan slide that I show, and it's like, okay, we've got a real problem here. And why do we have to pay for that? Well, we don't. We just have to take a different road.
Thank you. Richard, you shared a story that involves the three aspects of any great story: a not entirely prepared presentation, a baby monitor, and $100,000. Would you mind sharing that with us?
For sure. Well, I was the one not prepared, I'll tell you that. So one of the things that we do for our clients, any company that's got more than 100 mobile corporate liable devices, we do a completely free audit for them. No cost, no contingency fees, no obligation, to verify whether or not we can actually help them before either of us spend the time doing it. So I did this for a company it was actually a company in California. And when we present that back to them, we like to share them some statistics. You know, here are your top users. Here's the people that use the most data. Here's the one that cost you the most. And I usually look at those ahead of time because it's always fun to come back to them and say, did you know your top user was your janitor? And their eyes get this big. I didn't prepare this time. I didn't look ahead of time, and I pull up that slide, and the top user was the telecom manager that I was presenting to. So I was a little bit like, how do I navigate this? Because she's not going to want to go to her CFO and say, I want to spend money, and oh, by the way, I'm the top abuser of what's going on here. And what it came down to, a further conversation, was she was using her cell phone as her baby monitor. And it was her first child, and all of us that have had children, you're very careful with the first child. You do everything by the book. You do exactly what you should do. The second child, go play in the street. But but in this case, She was doing it because it gave her a few milliseconds faster connectivity than her Wi-Fi network did at home. So it was an education thing, easily corrected, but she ended up with about 200 gigabytes of data usage that month because of her cellular phone being a baby monitor. So one thing that you can do, and this is kind of a takeaway for you, a properly configured mobile device management software package where you've set that up where it can actually automatically detect a company-approved Wi-Fi network, would automatically switch that device from a cellular connectivity to the public or the company-approved Wi-Fi network. So really it comes down to visibility and education for your employees. Most people are not doing things egregiously. They're not intentionally trying to do. You probably have people that are binge watching Game of Thrones, but most of the time they're not doing that. And the other thing is usage on cellular devices changes so dynamically. You might have a user one month that only uses 1 gigabyte of data, and the next month, because of what they're doing for work, now they've used 100 gigabytes of data. So if you're not actively managing that every single month, you could be way over purchasing data usage, kind of like you go to the all-you-can-eat buffet, but you have a salad, or you could be way under purchasing the usage and be paying overage fees. So I always kind of look at it this way. If you've got a user that's using 1 gigabyte of data, the carrier's telling you, put everybody on an unlimited everything plan. Well, that's a really expensive gigabyte of data if they only used 1 gig. Why should you pay for that? It kind of goes along with what Erin's saying, right? Why would you pay extra when you shouldn't be paying extra? And they're not going to give it back to you next month because, oh, well, you didn't really need that unlimited everything plan. So you've got to pay attention. You've got to actively manage and monitor it every single month. It's not enough to do the traditional, what I would call the stare and compare. A lot of people get caught in the, I don't have time, it's about what I paid last month, I'm going to assume it's accurate, let's move on. That's not best practice. So there you go.
Thank you. All right, let's take one big step back. Bryan, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. How can organizations start on their cost savings journey?
A couple quick answers I think really are most impactful in that. First of all is get your data house in order. I'm going to say blessings on all of our financial friends and financial leaders. Most of the time, the data is not in really good financial order. Anyway, when it comes to being able to have it in such a detailed format that vendors can easily see what you're buying and can aggressively respond to that. So first and foremost, it's a data-driven business. Get the data house in order. And certainly for the organizations that maybe have rolled up through various acquisitions and may have disparate financial systems out there, presents a bit more of a challenge, but there are even low-cost technology solutions today that can bridge those gaps together and still roll things up into one comprehensive data set. Second thing is set priorities. A really fairly straightforward exercise to do is kind of create a 4-quadrant chart and plot out categories of spend with upper right kind of being your high spend areas and high strategic importance to the business. Obviously, straight down is still very strategic to the business, but not as high cost. And then we've got high cost, but low strategic value to the business, and then obviously low strategic, low cost. Start upper right. That's where you focus your time. Don't spend a lot of time churning through a lot of items, a lot of vendors. That's not going to really return to the business.
Thank you. Corey, you referenced this before, but I want to take it one step further. We're talking about utilization of facilities. We've never seen a change like we've seen the last 3 years. How do you help your clients map that for where they are now and where they're thinking they're going to be in a year or two?
Yeah. So getting your data in a row. That's what we've been telling companies for the past 3 years. So when it comes to utilization, a lot of these companies are coming to us and they haven't done it yet or they're still considering doing it, which is crazy as we're 3 years into a pandemic. So how we've been helping companies, first off, badge swipe data. This is something that companies, most of them have been keeping track, but many of them really haven't. Maybe they've collected the data, but they haven't analyzed or done anything with it. So number one, badge swipe. Also, sensors. And this is all stuff that people are putting inside their office buildings. You have to track the utilization, gathering that data. This is where we come in and we can help with that. Once we have that data, we can come and create a strategy. Now that companies are shifting to the hybrid workplace, they're really not, they're not utilizing their space. Before the pandemic, many of these companies were about 30% vacancy on any given day. So first and foremost, we're helping them take a look at this data, analyze it, and then help them right-size their footprint. And that's where the savings come in. Once we see that data, we know that you might be in 60,000. You only really need 30,000. Those are millions of dollars in savings that companies are missing, and that gets back to, again, knowing what you have and how you're using it. And this is how we can come in and help.
And there are tools to go find that, right?
Yeah, the first and foremost would be the badge swipe data, but there's also other technologies that JLL can help you evaluate and get into your offices, so you can start tracking that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Erin, you brought up some huge numbers, but I'm sure you have to make clients feel comfortable doing things differently than they've done before. Can you share that conversation with us?
I can, yeah. I mean, any change is hard, right? And what we're talking about is change, but it's a lot of just philosophical change, because at the end of the day, we're prescribing, for the most part, keep your same plan designs, keep going to your same providers. The logo on the ID card is a little bit different, and it requires education, right? Probably the same way Richard's organization requires education on don't use the baby monitor on your phone. So change is hard, whether you're moving from Cigna to Aetna, Blue Cross to Cigna. What we've seen is that it's really about engaging your employees so that they understand what's in it for them. Why are you making that change? To go back to the word you mentioned earlier, transparency. Education is really critical, especially in this environment. As Corey said, we're hybrid, we're there, we're not, we're all virtual. Change is important, and it can be difficult, no doubt, but it's necessary if we want to change a system that's broken. So I think communication, whether it's videos, on-site, education, printed material, whatever works well for your organization, keep doing it, and be transparent about why you're making a change. I'll give you an example. I have a client that is coming on 2 weeks ago. They said yes. They have a 7/1 effective date. It's a private school here in Chicago. And had they not moved to our model, they were looking at a 30% renewal increase from Blue Cross. So as we're preparing their presentation for open enrollment, that's the first slide. So that employees really know, here's what we were up against as the CFO and CEO and HR. We don't want to pass that on to you. Here's what we're going to do so that you can feel supported.
So maybe as a follow-up, I have to ask, if you think of all the entities you've converted, how many have gone back to the old way afterwards?
Oh, gosh. I mean, very rarely, Frank. Our retention rate is 89%. And so if someone goes back, it's because maybe a new CFO came in or new HR, or they changed brokers or consultants, and that broker consultant maybe didn't align or didn't believe in this concept. But it's really hard to leave kind of once you're in. To go back to that world where you don't have the transparency and the reporting and the support, frankly, that a smaller organization can provide.
Thank you. Corey, if we think about how fickle the real estate market has been, right, just a little, how do you help clients take a long view with all those oscillations?
Oh, gosh. I think it gets back to knowing what you have right now in this environment, there are so many ways to capitalize and really leverage existing market conditions. But taking a long-term stance, first and foremost, again, just start off and figure out what you have. From there, utilization, getting back to, how are you utilizing space? What do you need? Develop a plan. Typically, when we're talking to companies, they can typically see 3-5 years out. That's how we usually structure a lease, unless they need more capital to build out space. Then typically we'll try to do a longer term to offset those capital costs. But as far as taking the long term, having a long term plan, a lot of these companies we're talking to, again, they don't have a lot of insight past 3-5 years based on these current market conditions. So we try to build in flexibility if we are to do a long term lease, termination options, contraction options, expansion options. That's really how you plan out long term flexibility.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Richard, I'm going to ask you to challenge us all. We all know that flattening a chain always adds value, right? So I'm going to challenge you. How does adding a middleman to your mobile technology actually make it better?
I'm actually going to tell you I don't think adding a middleman's a good idea, and I'll tell you why. So adding a middleman in most cases is counterproductive. They tend to have their best interest in mind, and I would say most telecom expense management vendors are truly middlemen. We at Intratem consider ourselves an extension of your team, and in doing so, we are not a company that is a carrier replacement firm. You've probably all had those calls, right? If you'll just switch from Verizon to Mickey Mouse, I can save you money. Well, you're never going to switch to Mickey Mouse. So we don't do that. You've chosen your carriers for a reason. It's probably cost and probably also coverage are big factors as to why you did that. We're also not going to come in and say, let's change your contract. You may have just renegotiated your contract. You may have worked with a company like Bryan's that did a great job negotiating your contract, and maybe the contract is not the way to go. So we want to work with your team. We're an extension of your team. We're actually an extension of your carrier team as well. We're not trying to replace the carrier team. A good partner is somebody that works with the team and works with the resources and elevates everybody's game to be able to provide better services to your organization. And obviously, there are a lot of vendors out there that are, the carriers I'm speaking about that are trying to put everybody on the unlimited everything plan. Then you'll flat. Your budget's going to be flat. You know exactly what it's going to be every single month. And I would argue that's a horrible idea for the reasons I gave you a minute ago. And what Intratem does, and kind of taking what Corey said, he's right-sizing the business for the size facility that they need. We're right-sizing the usage of your cellular devices. We're actually looking at the usage from day 1 to day 30, and we're right-sizing that plan for that user that month before the bill generates. And we're backdating it to the first of the month and making sure you didn't underpurchase and you didn't overpurchase. But it's not good enough to do a one-time audit, which is what most of these firms are pitching. You've got to repeat that process every single month because that usage is dynamic. Your usage can change based on seasonality. Your businesses may have a lot of fluctuation with what you're doing. So how are you going to do that, though, right? You don't have an unlimited budget. You're not going to be able to hire 12 people to run your telecom department and manage these bills the way that they need to be managed. And so you have to be able to achieve those same results without a negative impact on your budget. So one of the nice things with us is that when we provide our services, it's no net impact to your budget. If there's ever a month that there's no savings, you pay us nothing that month. Even if we're providing help desk, procurement, staging, and kitting services, if I don't deliver a return on that investment, there is no cost to you for our services. And there really are very few companies in my space that'll do that. I would probably challenge you to find very many, maybe no other ones. I've been in the space 28 years. I've never heard of a company that did this until I joined Intratem.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're more of a customer advocate role.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely what we are. I think the one thing that I get very frustrated with, and as I said, I've been doing this a long time, is that vendors will come in, and not just in my space, but they'll come in and the anticipated ROI is going to be blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, when it doesn't hit it, well, that was the anticipated ROI. that's not guaranteed to you contractually. So, you want to work with a company that's going to stick their neck out, guarantee it. But when I was with the previous expense management companies that I was with, we charged a flat fee every month. If I didn't save you anything, you paid that flat fee every month. It didn't matter. But, and I always pitch the anticipated ROI. I'm so thankful to no longer have to do that. I want to be able to work with an organization, partner with that organization, and help them to succeed. And I always look at it, every dollar I save contributes more to where you can add additional staff and resources to help grow your business versus having to shrink to decrease your business. So, really it comes down to what's options the best for you.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I'm only going to ask one more question of each of our panelists, so we do have some time for Q&A. We have the room all night, folks. It'll be great. Bryan, can you share an example, without naming names, of a client that had a great cost savings achievement and how they went about getting it?
Yep. One thing I think that is a common theme across the firms represented here is how we really work hard to align and work from the side and perspective of our clients. So I'll go back to one of the things I said earlier, and that is in so many of the cases out there, the expertise in the room is typically coming from the vendor side. So that's what we bring to the table across a lot of the category experts that we have. So I would think of one client that we've completed most of the work now, but it's still an active client situation. It's a resin-based light industrial manufacturer, upper Midwest. We actually got involved through the due diligence effort of a private equity firm that was looking to acquire that firm, and we saw what we believed to be opportunity in their resin purchases. So once the deal closed, we were put in place to come alongside the internal procurement organization. We did a really deep dive assessment of the resin spend and confirmed opportunity. We subsequently led a strategic sourcing effort. Again, clients were with us through the entire process, and they're decent size. On an $80 to $90 million resin spend, we're now taking out, it's going to be $8 to $10 million of cost savings. It'll depend on what their ultimate annual spend is. Then we move to a next ancillary category, their colors and performance additives, 12 to 14 million in spend. Similar process and sourcing effort. We took another $1.5 million out of that spend. So two things I'll summarize then. Absolutely, opportunity exists out there if you can deploy the right process and the right expertise to go after it. And to Richard's point that he made, we don't provide anticipated ROI. We will ensure that those savings are captured and we stay with it through the entire process and through the entire first year following, so that client ensures that they get that benefit.
Thank you. Erin, you talk about saving clients 15 to 30%, but it requires them to do it differently. So how do you insulate your clients from errors, confusion, or other issues that will come about doing it differently?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. I think a lot of it is about setting the stage and being really clear with why a transition or a move would be made. I'll give you an example. So we have a client, about 200 employees. They were facing an 18% renewal increase. They decided to move to Imagine 360, saved boatloads of money, 15 to 30%. And what they did is they reinvested that savings back into their people. So they were able to waive premium contributions for 3 months. Not everyone does that big move in the first year, but it's a great way to say, we're giving you better benefits, lower deductibles. We are waiving the premiums. We're increasing telemedicine and making it a stronger plan. And so that was the message that was communicated. And to Corey's point earlier, where we're in this environment where we're in a recession, it's hard to attract and retain employees. Competitors are knocking on your door and on your employees' Glassdoor or resume, if you will, or LinkedIn. This is just a different way to put this model in place, and it requires engagement and education. But I truly think when you make a decision and you explain it well, that individuals can get on board with that. So a lot of communication.
Okay. Speaking of communication, Corey, maybe can you walk us through just a couple of the levers that you avail your clients to so they feel good about having choices even though they have a long-term contract?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the levers that we compare, obviously the face rent. Again, benchmarking, what are you paying versus the market or other tenants in the building, but making sure you're getting a good deal from a concessions standpoint. So a lot of these transactions, you'll get free rent, gross rent abatement, tenant improvement allowance. This market has just been extremely aggressive over the past 3 years now. We're seeing concession packages in upwards of $250, $300 a square foot, which translates into millions of dollars, for a transaction. So, how do you know you're getting a good deal? Is that what you're?
Sure.
Yeah. So we usually are comparing by net effective rent. So we're backing out these concessions. And it really tells you at the end of the day how much is the landlord making on this deal. And on a lot of these transactions, they've been negative. So the landlords are just trying to shore up their occupancy within the building. They increase the value, and they're giving away deals to attract tenants. So it's an interesting environment. The next 18 months are going to be very interesting, as there's a ton of distressed assets that really haven't floated to the top yet. So,
And to finish this section off, Richard, you get to end it with everyone's favorite topic, risk, cybersecurity, and safety. No pressure. How do you help your clients manage that risk?
I'm going to start with a poll. How many of you have a cybersecurity policy today? Just show of hands. Okay, well, I don't know if you're aware, but just by having a policy in place, you'll get discounts on your cybersecurity insurance just for having one. It doesn't even have to be a great policy. You just have to have a policy. So that'd be first thing I would do tomorrow is go to your CIO if you've got one, or your VP of IT or director of IT, get one pulled. ChatGPT would probably give you one if you asked for it, but you could do that. So, and then if you've got one, when was the last time you actually reviewed it? When was the last time you had it audited by an outside third party to make sure it's current and up to date and covers all the areas that it should cover? So one other area that I'll share with you that's another concern is something as simple as managing operating systems. And I've got some statistics, and I'm going to read them right off this card because there are a lot of statistics, but I'll hit them pretty quick because they were shocking to me when I saw it. More than 50% of smartphones don't have the latest operating system running. So if they're not running the latest operating system, it's not secure, folks. Then 43% of mobile device users don't have a passcode or a PIN or a pattern lock on their devices. So how secure is that if they've got corporate liable data on that device and they lose it? And 1 in 4 mobile apps include at least one high-risk security flaw, and business apps, believe it or not, are 3 times more likely to leak login credentials than the average app. And this is from a study that was done by a company called Now Secure. So having, again, I go back to this because I've actually been shocked by the number of companies I talk to that when I say, what are you using for mobile device management? And they say, well, we don't have anything in place yet. We plan to get to that. Well, you're a huge risk for cybersecurity issues if you don't have one in place. So put in a mobile device management solution. There are some very inexpensive ones out there that you could put in that would let you get started with it right away, and then you can build on it later when you have more of a budget to do it. But there are companies that for very little money you can get going and put mobile device security on those devices. So we do help companies with that. We are not I'm not going to promote any one mobile device management platform over another. I think it really depends on the business and the needs, and you have to choose that vendor based upon what your particular needs are, but we can help with that evaluation, and then ultimately the choice is yours.
So as we shift to Q&A, so you have just a moment to get those questions formulated, I'll ask each panelist for the one thing, lightning round speed dating, that you think everyone should take away from this conversation. 3, 2, 1. Richard.
So the number one thing is, are you prepared for what you can't see? You know, and that's the biggest thing. And you can't prepare for everything, but recognize the areas where your staff might be short. You don't have enough resources. And I say this from personal experience. You know, when I was managing telecom, the one thing that never has left my mind is that I used to manage all the fixed voice and data. And it was a big job. And we got mobility, and they said, oh, it's not that big of a deal. You're already managing telecom. How much more work could it be? Well, it was 10 times more work for me to manage mobility than what it was for me to manage the fixed. You put the fixed in, it's going to work. Unless there's a problem, you're not dealing with it every single month, having to look at it. But with mobility, it's something that you really have to pay attention to. And you'll see on the slides up here, with my slide, there is a QR code. If you'll scan that, whether we ever talk again, whether we ever do business again, there are 5 ways that you can save on mobility services. It's a guide you can download just by scanning that QR code. It's things you can go back and talk to your technology folks tomorrow and say, are we doing these things? And if you're not, you certainly should be.
Thank you. And Bryan, same question.
Yeah, so I'm going to make at least the assumption that most everybody as a financial leader is really pushing your organizations to get out into the market, to start working to take advantage of markets coming back. If not, first thing, get out in the market. There are opportunities to take advantage of. Second, though, along with that is set priorities, set appropriate priorities of how you do spend your time. Do that 4-quad segmentation of your spends so that you know you're truly deploying limited resources, stressed resources on the areas that's going to return the best, yield the best return to the organization.
Thank you. Erin, same question.
So I would say challenge deeply held assumptions that I gotta have Blue Cross, or Blue Cross is my doctor. Challenge that assumption. Challenge your broker consultant. If you have not heard about reference-based pricing, there could be a reason. Your broker consultant may not feel comfortable with it themselves. They may not know it. They may not believe in it. But there are resources for you to learn about, and I'm here all night. And just really think outside the box. Think big picture. This is a long-term solution to get you off the hamster wheel of those 5, 10, 20, 40% renewal increases. And just think big about insurance and what else would you have to do to get 10 to 30% back in your budget for healthcare.
Thank you. And finish it up, Corey, what have you have for us?
I would just tell all of your employees to get back to the office 5 days a week at least. No, I think again it gets back to data and knowing what you have, how you're utilizing that, and develop a strategy and make sure that HR, IT, real estate, finance, and the C-suite are all aligned and communicating. Because we have found oftentimes that one person, has a requirement that maybe another function is unaware, and we're going down the road and going through a project and find out that not everybody's on the same page, or they didn't know they had information on hand to evaluate. So it's really communication, data, analyzing the data, develop that strategy. And that's where our team can come in and really do the heavy lifting.
Thank you. And all 4 of our panelists will be available during the cocktail session afterwards. If you can pick their ear. But does anyone have a question now that you want to ask Mike Nadler?
Corey, this is for you. Your firm represents owners of buildings as well as tenants. So how do you negotiate if you're representing both sides of the, or do you?
Are you inferring there's a conflict of interest?
Well, that could be.
Yeah.
You've been able to negotiate negative returns on leases. But if you're representing the owner, you're not going to accept that.
So end of the day, it's our fiduciary duty to represent the tenant, our agency side, represents the landlord. And at the end of the day, it has to be a market deal. How do you know you're getting a market deal? That's what comes back to the net effective rent that I'd mentioned earlier. And we hear this a lot because we manage a lot of property downtown, and we also represent on the agency side assets too. So does another firm and a few other firms. So we're not the only one. But in all seriousness, it really comes back to how do you know you're getting the best deal, and we can demonstrate that. We have the database of proposals, closed transactions. We'll show you the net effective rents. So, you're not just saying, you got a great deal. We show you the data. And again, we represent you. It's our fiduciary duty. It's totally separate from agency and property management. So we do get that question a lot.
I believe earlier tonight someone said something about process. Yes, Randall. So I won't repeat the question entirely, but if you could repeat it as you answer, because there are some differences with what you present with the self-insurance model.
Yeah, so the first question was kind of what size should you be to be self-funded? That's a matter of comfort, Randall, right? So that's a matter of comfort. The group from 2 weeks ago, 47 employees. And then we have clients that have 10,000. So if you can budget and fund to your maximum exposure, and we model all of that, your maximum, your expected, where do we think you're going to wind up, then you could probably get comfortable with the model of self-funding as long as you know your risk. You all know that better than me, being CFOs in this room. Your second question was around kind of access and network and who's in and who's out. So this is a different philosophy in that there is no network. There's no in and out of network. And so you really can, for the most part, keep going where you're going today. There are very, very rare occasions that a provider wants to be a bully, and that's what they are, because they're used to getting paid hundreds of percentage points above Medicare, and then our members come in and say, I'm on the plan. So we have 1,300 employees at our organization. I've gone to North Shore, which we don't have a contract with, and I haven't had any sort of poor experience other than they may not recognize the logo on my ID card because I don't have a billboard on 90, right? So that's the only thing. It's really educating providers on how they're going to be paid and what they're going to be paid and why. Typically, there aren't any issues.
Sure.
This is recording a question. So, you talk about the hybrid model, right? And, collaboration, I think about collaboration, all that good stuff.
Unfortunately, I don't think hybrid is going away.
Okay.
That said, over the last 3 years, I think we've all come to a general answer, which is, generally speaking, 3 days back, but it's not a one-size-fit-all. So we've seen, law firms, for instance, they've been a very pro-office. They've been one of the most active sectors downtown, from return to office, flight to quality. You're hearing about it quite a bit. A lot of these law firms are going to these new developments. So I don't think it's going away. No.
Well, thank you all, and thank our panel.
Again, thank you. That was very insightful. I'm going to be calling several of you. Be on the lookout for our follow-up email containing the session recording, slide deck, and much more. And please check our FEI calendar of events for our amazing upcoming Summer Social, June 15th at Beatrix in River North, and our annual golf outing on August 11th at White Pines in Bensonville. So we will adjourn now to for hors d'oeuvres and cocktails in the next room. So thank you again, panelists, for being involved. Love having you.